Eid al-Adha is known as the Eid of sacrifice, and it's connected to the sacrifice of an animal, which, if we go back historically, was practiced by Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam sacrificed an animal due to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which he saw in his dream, to sacrifice his son, a son that he was yearning for, that he had deep desire for after not having children for many, many years in his life. Allah tested his resolve, Allah tested his love for him and commanded him to sacrifice his son for his sake. And Allah Ta'ala saw Ibrahim alayhi succeeding in that test. And of course it was never his intent to sacrifice the son and replace that son with an animal from heaven. So this Eid is connected with sacrifice. Muslims do not celebrate Eid by sacrificing an animal, but they observe Eid, you can say, by sacrificing an animal. In a sense, it's a sacrifice of one's wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by sacrificing an animal or slaughtering an animal. And this sacrificing of an animal, slaughtering of an animal on the day of Eid al-Adha is considered to be from one of the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, known as the sha'air. Allah says, وَالْبُدْنَ جَعَلْنَاهَا لَكُم مِّن شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ لَكُم فِيهَا خَيْرٌ. That these animals, we have made them for you from the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for you in them there is khair and good. And when it comes to the discussion of symbols of Allah, there are numerous symbols or things that are, or characteristics, or you can say objects that are known to be the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're commanded to fulfill them and not to violate them. So when Allah says sacrifice an animal during this time of the year, then it's to be observed and fulfilled and not to be violated or to be interpreted in a different way. This is what Allah Ta'ala intends for these specific days. Now, the deeper meaning behind sacrifice is also very important for Muslims to understand. Like, what is the deeper meaning behind sacrifice and struggle? And that takes us back to the story of Ibrahim alayhi and the origins of that story as well. Ibrahim alayhi throughout his life is struggling and he's sacrificing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at this specific point of his life, when he has a son, after many, many years of yearning and desiring a child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands him to take his wife Hajar radiyallahu anha and his son Ismail alayhi salam to Makkah Mukarramah, which at that time was uninhabited, a barren land, and to leave them there. Can you imagine that? The coolness of your eyes and your wife, you're commanded by Allah to leave them in an uninhabited area or a barren land. He's leaving them there. And his wife Hajar radiallahu anha, like any normal person, would ask, are you leaving us here? Ibrahim alayhi salam doesn't respond. And then she asks again, are you leaving us here? He doesn't respond. And then she asks the question from a different angle. Is this Allah's command? Because she was the wife of the Prophet, Ibrahim. So she understood that he only works under Allah's command. Was this Allah's command? He says, yes. She says, then Allah will not put your efforts in vain. Allah will not waste us. What an interesting conversation. What an interesting mode of questioning. On one hand, we have a Prophet of Allah. On the other hand, we have his wife. Both deeply faithful servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obedient servants of Allah. Not for one moment was Hajar radiallahu anha doubting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, what she is teaching all of us is steps for active acceptance of Allah's will. Hajar radiallahu anha first asked, then she trusted, and then she accepted. And by doing so, she traced the steps of active acceptance of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to question with one's mind, to understand with one's intelligence, and then to submit and accept with one's heart. At times we face different trials in our lives. We have to take a step back and understand them. Where is the trial coming from? We don't know the meaning behind it sometimes, and we don't know the results in this world. What we certainly know that Allah will not waste our efforts. So in this entire story of Hajar radiallahu anha, Ibrahim alayhi salam, we're seeing how a person can reach the point of tawakkul and placing their reliance and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his plan. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us and trial us. We are his servants. But we have to remember Allah is speaking to us along the way. Like Ibrahim alayhi salam was spoken to along the way. At each step, Allah is strengthening him, nurturing him, guiding him, showing him his path. Allah has a path for all of us, for you and I. We don't know what that path is exactly. We're not privy to that. And we're not charged with knowing that either, because it's beyond our capability. It's an unseen realm that we're not privy to. But Allah Ta'ala has a plan for us. We have to accept it and place our trust in Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala.